Hello and welcome back to an episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today I'm very pleased joining me, GP Worrell. He's the co-founder and CPO at Blubird. Um, of course, my audience knows that I don't like to steal a lot of the show from my guests, but today we're gonna talk about Web3. We're gonna talk about tokenization, and we're gonna talk about what GP and the team are doing at Bluebird. And without further ado, GP, thank you very much for being here with me
Sure.
today again. I'm
Thank
gonna,
you.
pass it to you. Tell us a bit more about you, your background, your journey, and then we can deep dive immediately after this. So the floor is yours.
Sure. So I guess I'll start with myself, and then we'll jump over to Bluebird itself.
Sure.
I've been in the space since 2016. My background is traditional TradFi. I've worked for Fortune 50s, 100s, 500s across the board over a period of around 2.5 decades. I've been specifically in the blockchain space since 2016, and met my co-founder Corey on actually our first project in the space, and have had a relationship ever since. And we started Bluebird about 4 years ago. And at Bluebird, we focus on the infrastructure layer of tokenization. So not just issuing tokens, but building systems that let RWAs, for example, operate at an institutional scale. So think compliance, governance, investor onboarding, reporting, lifecycle management, basically building the rails that the market runs on.
Great. And this is, kind of a first question to me. While a lot of people they focus on the tokens at the asset level, you are, as you said, you focus on the infrastructure. Like, what's the opportunity there? Like, why you felt like there's a need to have a game changing product for this space?
So again, I mean, yeah, that's a good point to bring up. We focus less on the assets themselves, although we do have some pieces that address that. Infrastructure is really kind of where we believe that the market opportunity is. So it's the future of ROV products really isn't in customization, bespoke tokens. It's in a modular system. So you think about it the same way fintech moves from building banks to kind of assembling APIs, right? Like it's plug and play components. It's reusable across multiple asset classes. You've got you're solving for deployment and low and regulatory risk. So um, we're really more about moving kind of like from this artisanal kind of tokenization to industrial systems. That's where we see it right now, and so that's where our focus is.
Great. Now, as usual, because I'm not expert in this domain, GP, honestly, and of course I have some knowledge. I'm not saying I'm totally ignorant, but I try to get some similarities for my audience so they can understand, some of the, I would say, rationale for the reason, you know, to do what you're doing. So I know like you've worked in Web2, Web3, UX, and enterprise systems, and you mentioned this in your introduction. Now, what is the main thing you see founders repeating when building real world assets platforms usually today?
So there are some things that are in common, obviously. There are everybody's trying to recreate and having to be very hands on. So think they're spinning up their own token contracts, right? That's a great one. Think about that's a highly repeatable piece of it for sure. Then you have other pieces that are it probably steps more into not necessarily repeatable, but things that potentially are related to like de-risking, right? Like so ensuring that your regulatory framework is correct, ensuring that your KYC, your AML is correct. So really, it's more about the facilitation of the piece and less about like the repeatable pieces. The repeatable pieces are kind of like the standard go tos, like again, tokenizing the creating the contracts themselves. The chains that they're choosing, like we saw for a couple of different problems related to that, but really the tokenization itself is the most repeatable. and where it falls short is on the execution, if that makes sense.
Yeah, can I think about it, GP, similar to when I have these frameworks, for example, in in the web development world, like it's like we have like some frameworks. So we have like the authentication, which is like you don't have to rebuild it from scratch, and then you have, of course, like your hardening for your database that you don't have to reinvent every time. So can I think about it in the same way here?
Right. So, right. Again, we go back to the word modularity, right? Everything's built from a modular component and assembled into a single platform. Those are the types of platforms that don't exist, and that's the opportunity that was seen in the area that we felt that we could capitalize on.
Right. So moving forward, you promote that every single RWA or like real world asset tokenization product would be just a building blocks or modular building kind of, right.
Sure. Each one has their
Ca
own each one has their own variation, right? So when we're talking RWAs, specifically like where we're headed right now, when you start thinking about the RWAs themselves, you have, and I'll just throw out some examples.
Sure.
Um, you have precious metals, you have real estate, you've got fractional ownership, then you've got extended out to like really crazy things like the an RWA asset of tokenization for blocks of a coral reef. Like those are real things, they're real scenarios, and they do exist, and they are clients of ours. But each one is different and therefore has its own. It shares about 80% of the same platform, and then it has a bespoke nature to it based off of that. And so when you look at it, the interesting thing is that they all mature in the same way, right? Um, and they all have people building things from scratch, but the infrastructure is where you start to see the weakness and where it needs to kind of emerge, and that's where the platforms become really important, for sure.
Yeah. um so when we think about building like building blocks,
Mhm.
and having the focus will become on what's defensible, right? So when I think about it this way, so in your opinion, like what's the commodity and what's still defensible in this situation?
What's defensible? The whole entire platform becomes defensible, right? Like it allows the assets to become defensible. And each one is kind of unique, but you look at it and you've got, for us, the infrastructure creates a transactional layer, and the transactional layer is really kind of becomes the defensible piece.
Right. And when we talk about, I'm sometimes following what other people are doing in this space, and I
Sure.
see like the time to market matters a lot. So how much how much advantage do modular platform really give versus like
Oh,
custom
that's a
build?
good one. That's a good one. So when you back into the way most people are doing tokenization, those are pretty long tail. They require a lot. If I'm speaking from like worst case
Sure.
scenario, if they have to create their own contracts with a development team, if they've got to stand up their own registry or marketplace portals, like things like that, things that we're talking about scaling down from, what normally takes months to do, to weeks or less than a week, right? So for us, for example, we already support many, 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 many chains. We're chain agnostic, actually. So we remove that piece, right? Chain agnostic and audit ready. So that solves for the tokenization contracts themselves, right? Everything that we have is because of the way our smart contracts are audited. Companies don't have to have their own contracts audited because we've already got the engine's contracts already audited. So we're talking about some extremely key pieces. Like you can even, you can go deeper than that. You can go the KYC and the AML pieces already baked in. Like if someone had to build that and put that together themselves, you're talking in a very long duration of time where it's baked into our system, and that's kind of how we looked at it to begin with. So, one of the biggest pieces of the platform is time and scale.
Now, let me ask you the question from maybe the regulator's point of view, GP. Of course, um, for them, what does trustworthy infrastructure really mean when we talk about tokenized assets?
Sure. So for us, when it comes down to it, you've got the piece that is related to the transaction itself, which is peer to peer. So, and then you've got the regulatory or kind of the de-risking piece, which is inherently built in the same as well. So the trust lies in two layers. One, the trust that the asset is going to move the way that it needs to, and secondarily that it has the backing of the framework around it from can it and should it be moved at a um, de-risking level.
Got you. And what do you think, like this also means for the mainstream audience trust in these assets also, GP? Because,
Right.
I know it's not a technical question, but like what how, for me, like let's say an investor or like maybe someone who follows this space, like how this might increase my appetite to go and invest in these assets actually, or like deal with them. Although I know like some governments globally, like for example, I'm Dubai, I know they are pushing very hard on tokenization. They start to do it for real estate and other things, so this gave like people like some
If
confidence, right?
you do
But
think with DECA and all of that are regulated, I'm very familiar with what you're talking about. Yeah,
yeah, so but again, I'm trying to relate little bit, having a solid platform, a trustworthy infrastructure, you know tied with what regulators usually want to see, and then how this will affect the behavior of the general audience, I would say.
sure, sure. So if we go back again to the core premise, we're the system layer.
Mhm.
So we sit between issuers, investors, regulators, and blockchains. And we manage the onboarding and the compliance and the registry piece, the distributions reporting, things like that, and governance in the unified stack. And so that lets partners focus on the assets while we handle the infrastructure. So that's really, I just want to go back to that because that's really the premise of what we're talking about is sitting at a system layer, and that inherently comes with other pieces of knowledge or access. Now, and honestly, where you keyed on something about investors, and although we do work with investors of all scale, but primarily where we are tilted right now is really at that governmental level or at that commodity level, which is a different base of type of user, which have completely potentially different rules and regulations. And so, you know, with our focus, it's really oriented towards that side of the industry at this point as well. So,
Right. Do you see that also a way, GP, so with what you're doing at Bluebird, for probably entrepreneurs, founders in this space who think like, yeah, I need a big team, and they start to try to raise money maybe to get there. No, is this also a way to encourage like more projects in this space? Do you see it a one use case also in the tokenization
sure.
vertical?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, so we have, and it's interesting you should ask that. We have the RWA registry and marketplace, and we also have a foundational set of core products that's geared towards exactly what you're talking about. So think about tokenizing the equity within your company, and thinking about pushing that equity out to raise capital and raise funds. It's the same method. It's just a different. It's a different scale, and it's a different approach. It's an approach allowing founders to actually raise funds for their company, as opposed to an RWA layer that sits into, well, we are transacting assets, digital assets, for payment. So
Yeah,
we actually do sit on both sides and do see both sides.
right. Now, I know like you're trying also to strengthen this as you've discussed so far, the infrastructure, and this is where, you know, probably projects might fail, I would say, because they don't have the base. And you kept repeating, AML, KYC, and these kinds of stuff, which is for people who are not familiar, like anti-money laundering and know your customer, which was very important when it comes to coming to a regulated space, especially it's related somehow to fintech. Now, but do you think like this is having the good infrastructure is enough to have a successful project when it comes to real world assets tokenization? Or from a, and I'm asking you this from a maybe product person perspective,
Sure.
GP, where do you see, people also fail, and where they might need also to, I would say, put their focus on? Is it like on partnerships? Is it on go to market? And why?
Good question. I think a lot of people fall in the pitfalls of, if they build it, they will come kind of theory.
Yep.
And so, the RWA and infrastructure is only one piece. I mean, you really have to, just from a business perspective and a product perspective, you still have to manage your pipelines. You still have to grind and get it done. Like, you still have to have sales channels and vehicles. You still have to have market fit. So if you don't have market fit, for example, you can tokenize anything you want to, but there'll be no market to support it. That's where the most of the failure points are. The failure points are, the infrastructure helps support that. So it offsets cost, it offsets time to market, it scales, and can handle the actual functionality piece, which is where we like to sit. Um, but what you're talking about is a much greater scale of everything from, do you have the right human capital down to do you have the right plan? And that's where most of them fail. And it doesn't matter whether they've raised capital or not. I've seen both sides, and that's really where that's where it comes down to. Infrastructure is just the vehicle to help solve for a particular part.
So that means it doesn't matter like what kind of blockchain they're running on. Is it Ethereum? Is it like, I don't know, like any kind of thing? So the, the worry of what kind of infrastructure should not be showstopper, I would say. Am I thinking the right way?
Yeah, well, in an ideal world, yes. Now, if people try and build, the theory of RWAs being built from scratch is, I think, rapidly declining. And that's why they won't be built from scratch. At some point, they won't be, because they don't scale, they're not compliant, they don't survive regulation. But again, that's just one piece. But you're correct in saying that. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There are other things outside of it. You can have the best infrastructure you want, the best product underlying your project. It's the other pieces that become really important. And what we're seeing is making sure that the market fit is there, and also that, a lot of them is ensuring that they have a base of buyer too. So like there's a whole slew of things that could happen.
Right. Now, I can't have an episode nowadays without, asking about AI. Now, I'm not sure like what's the AI play here in this GP. Tell me.
Sure. So the AI there is, and this is just, again, this is just from my perspective. There's a lot of opportunity to supplement platforms with proper AI, by proper agent models. Now, and that just doesn't mean go tack on a chat bot or go, or use the AI for the sake of using AI. But where it becomes valuable is when you have a platform that already has the infrastructure, but you have a base of users that don't understand necessarily the platform, or not necessarily platform, but their jurisdiction, their regulatory frameworks they need to be in. The agents can help support a lot of that. And that's just my thought. That's what I'm thinking about. Like I think about in execution, whether that's standing up the proper RWA structure, whether that's standing up the proper corporate structure, whether that's actually choosing, let's say, a deployment type based off of your investors. A lot of that can be supplemented by um, an AI agent model to kind of help. At least that's my thought on it. I always try and bring it back to the work product. The work product is the infrastructure, and there are a whole series of challenges for people just trying to get that accomplished. Even if you have a system that is invisible on tech and easy to use, there's still, that's where I see the benefit is in not necessarily replacement of anything, but supplemental to the overall infrastructure.
Great. Yeah, of course. I think, plenty of additional use case will unfold with the rise of agentic AI also as well, and everything which is happening currently. Um,
Sure.
but
And that's a
yeah,
great question. I love those questions. Like AI, the crossover between AI and the infrastructure and blockchain space and stuff like, it's extremely intriguing, right? And I can tell you we've been working and are working on a lot of conceptual prototypes that are very much oriented to that space. But again, it's leveraging the models based off of a business use case and not for the sake of just saying that it's in there.
right. Yeah, I
And that's how,
have.
and that's how
Yeah,
everything was built. That's how everything was built for us. It's always been around a business use case.
absolutely. Now I have a special, I would say, empathy with product people like yourself, GP. Um, but I asked more CTOs and actually, CEOs in that space more than product people in the Web3 space, how the function is different. And, if feel free to tell me, like, within your current role at Bluebird, like, what things as product chief of product you would do at a Web3, especially like when to hear we're talking also about tokenization, rather than a traditional Web2 application, even like a Web2 fintech application.
Sure. You know, so there's some differences and there's some similarities, right? So, like I said, I've been in the space, overall space of product for 2.5 decades. There are some very universal things that cross over, right?
Mhm.
Like the in CPO roles are very similar to the other executive roles, if not a lot of crossover. So to give you an idea, in my role, I mean, I'm everything, including the trash man, right? So I'm working on product. I'm working on deep level product concepts, operational pieces, founders meetings, um, pitch. I mean, you name it, it does fall into the product owner's realm because the product owner is the key piece to sitting between all of the layers and ensuring that it meets the business requirements, that it has proper funding, that has a proper team in place, that has a proper product plan in place. I mean, my day covers literally all of those things from the CPO. And then you tack on the fact that I was one of the co-founders alongside Corey. There's a lot of overlap between he and I. He's a CEO, I'm the CPO. And even our CTO Matt. There's a lot of, we all wear a lot of hats that cross over, but we all carry the weight in different areas. But I mean that's kind of a loaded question depending on the project, right? Also,
Yes.
like depending on early stage where they are, of course they're gonna be like, "Well, I do everything," but in a lean system, in a lean machine, well funded project, the CPO literally it sits in that layer of operations, somewhere between operation strategy and actual product implementation. And that's
Yeah, and
pretty
go
much,
to market also as well.
oh yeah, go to market. Yes, can't forget that. Can't forget sales and marketing.
Yeah, and I feel like you're lucky, JP, because I think you have the chance to sit down with a lot of founders in this space. So
Sure.
Yeah, like, do you usually like see nowadays like really cool ideas coming up for new kind of tokenization projects these days?
That's a good question. Like I can tell you right now, I see a lot of 80% of the same thing. You know,
Okay.
everybody's after these graphs, right? Everybody's like, oh, real estate, real estate, real estate, right?
Yes.
But yeah, we do because we're talking right now and working on a project that, like I said, it's related to tokenizing square meters of coral reefs,
Oh,
and because that's something that an organization wants to do. We're seeing we've seen some wild like tokenization of like one-off pieces of jewelry that are fractionalized, right? Like, we are seeing some interesting things, but I will tell you for the most part, there's kind of like what I would call the space race, kind of thought, for standardization of most tokens. I mean, of most things, of most assets, such as, like I said, real estate, metals, things like that.
yeah, these are the main two ones I hear a lot about, especially in this part of the world where I am. Like real estate is big, very, very big.
It is over.
And yeah, and the other one is, yeah, of course, precious metals like gold, silver, all these kinds
Right,
of
or
things.
commodities, things like that. The reality is that you're going to have a few infrastructures that remain over the test of time, and the others will all fall away, because they're missing one key piece or another,
Do
really.
you think, yeah, do you think GP like also we were finally able at least remove some of the bad things that happened, I think between 2017, 2018, when all these, you know, crazy kind of projects were coming and tokenize everything and create a token for crazy stuff that,
Sure.
and the people were trying to do like what used to call like initial coin offerings, ICOs. Are we cross this phase, or do you still think there are some people stuck in these moments and still they look skeptical to the industry in general?
I think that we're somewhere where we're in the middle. I think that people are still gonna tokenize their businesses. They're still gonna have these potential kind of ICO related stuff. That's a kind of an antiquated term, but they're still going to have tokenization offerings. It's just going to maybe be fundamentally a little bit different. And when and at the same time, you all do have a lot of the kind of noise kind of falling away, which the market's showing you that right now. And then so you've got these particular key pieces that, at the end of the day, I think there'll always be some skepticism. I don't think we're out of even remotely out of that yet. There's still adoption issues. There's still market fit issues. Um, it's just what you're touching on was a little bit Wild West, a little bit of cash grab, a little bit of opportunity, but I don't know if those opportunities are there anymore. And I think that's why people have to, if you follow on that thread, it's why they're having a lot of the 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 the, the early NFTs or RWAs, whatever you want to call them, um, because they're not real world assets. But and that's the other difference, right? Like, you got something that's that is just they're completely different related. They're not backed by hard assets or anything like that. I think you're going to have your skepticism there, across the board for a while, but I do think that the trend is cooled off, specifically for what you're referring to, which was a lot of different, they had no value, no real value related to, let's just say, where the space is headed with actual RWAs, right? It's really hard to not be skeptical about a meme or an NFT when
Yes,
you can also look at an RWA and say, okay, it's backed by this gold mine in this region of the world, and here is the invoice takeoff of that, or here's the actual digital twin of the actual asset itself. They're vastly different things.
absolutely. And but the good thing which is happening now is I think we have more great thought leaders in the space. At least I can talk
Thanks.
about the region where I am, where they really try to, instead of pushing the technology for the sake just of pushing the technology. They try to exactly explain the use case, why actually we need this, right? So why we need to tokenize this? Like, what's the benefit? What is it for me as end user or an investor or, maybe
Right.
even a partner? So I think like market started to mature, I would say. And maybe, yeah, you're right. Like we're still in the middle of that phase
I think
going up from there.
we definitely have a ways to go. The market is maturing. It's not mature. I mean,
Yes, it's maturing. It is
that's
maturing.
really what it comes down to, because I mean, it just isn't.
But GPI, and I argue with people sometimes, is I tell them like, look, it's not only regarding the Web3 or like the blockchain and these things, because when the internet came up, let's think about Web 1.0, like
Gosh,
also yeah, it wasn't mature, right? Like we didn't reach to where we have. It took us like 30 years, right? So
oh,
and sometimes you need to give time.
that is true. My first job ever was Web 1 work at a newspaper helping get their .com off the ground, and that was in 1995.
Yeah, wow.
So I've seen I've seen the scale, of what you're talking about, and there's was skepticism there, and if you
Yeah,
follow the thread and start to pull on the thread a little bit, it was the defining point, for a lot that happened after that. But yeah, sure, same
yeah,
theories,
yeah. I
skepticism,
think
them early
I think
entry.
same thing is happening now in front of our eyes with the AI. Like, you
Oh
know,
yeah,
yeah, people like still I think they're not understanding what's happening, and they're just throwing theories here and there, and they're trying to say, oh, like this is will fail. It's like a fad. Oh, it's gonna do this, gonna do that, and funny, how this is affecting even the stock market, like and
sure.
people think like software is dead, and and I think like these kinds of big, they cause this, right?
Yeah, it's saturated. I'm not going to say it's not saturated. I mean, if you want to take the AI model, let's pick on that for a minute with, all the financial applications that you can go get from the app store that say, "Oh, with $20 or with this, we're going to turn $20 into 200,000, or we're going to give
Yeah,
you and it's blind faith of the general population being hooked into a good mousetrap with a good narrative to actually create income, and it's not for them, right? So that's where AI, in my opinion, is being, we'll just say, being kind of, I'm trying to think about the right word for it without saying anything rude. Kind of, it's being, i- i- it's just the smoke and mirrors a little bit. And
yeah,
I'm not saying that those things aren't true and real and they don't happen and they don't work. Um, it's just it's where you get some of that skepticism of AI versus and the general population versus someone that is educated in it and says, okay, I don't need an application to do that. For example, I will find my own agent to do what I need to do. And that's the real beauty of AI is when you put it in the A, when you put it in the position, when you put people in the position of actually understanding the use versus where it's kind of trending right now. You use the word trend,
yep, yep.
great trend.
I don't. Yeah, it's a trend. Like I try to find another word, but I cannot. Like it is a trend.
Yeah, I mean, AI plans your trips, it feeds your dog. I mean, it makes you money. I mean, yeah, oh, by the way, it does it 24/7. It's just,
Oh, yeah,
oh, I can go down the rabbit hole about that, about conversations around that.
absolutely. Now, JP, if we want to go back to the tokenization and real world asset, and the infrastructure, and if you want to think about a breakthrough, I don't know if I might use the right word. Like everyone, because we talk about AI, they talk about the Chat GPT moment, right? So,
Right.
what would be such a moment in maybe I cannot say 1 year, 2 years. I don't know how the pace would be, but what would be the breakthrough in infrastructure? Would it be like in the custody? Would it be in the identity? Would it be in the data itself, or maybe somewhere else? Where do you expect like the biggest breakthrough to happen?
I think that occurs where today's market isn't about about token hype. It's about operational trust, and that's where I think infrastructure wins, and that's where we're placed, and that's where I think the moment kind of is, right. So when all the current demand signals are kind of met, that's kind of what we're keying in on, right. So at the point when infrastructures, institutions want infrastructure and compliant products, issuers that want the lifecycle tooling of the entire piece, regulators are their expected audit trails are met, and you have a modular and reusable infrastructure for development teams. That's when you'll see it, and that's all related to operational trust. Because if you meet those key 4 signals, then you've kind of achieved that. And that's my thought on it.
Great. Um, Finally, GP, and it was great discussion with you today. Where people can get in touch and find out more.
Sure. They can go to getblubird.com. Blubird spelled Blubird. It's no E in it. That's a great place. They can reach out to me on LinkedIn directly. Those are really the main vehicles for us. I mean, we're accessible. We're all extremely accessible. We're available. We are glad to have conversations across the board. We kind of take an education first kind of approach.
Mhm.
That's one piece of the RW space that very much suffers is not that's the knowledge of that. So we're glad to talk. And again, we can be reached at either one of those places, or even our X. I'm like, someone is always monitoring and managing those, and then we can go from there. So that's the easiest way to get to us.
Great. And for the audience, again, I put the links in the show notes so you can reach out easily either to GP or to Bluebird team directly. JP, thank you very, very much for this great conversation today. I learned a lot also as well. And this is why I love to do this podcast, because it's not like only just, two random dudes talking to each other. It's like more about, you know, spreading knowledge and spreading what really matters. So thank you very much for being one of my guests. And this is usually how I end my episodes. This is for the audience. Is you If you guys just discovered us by luck, thank you for passing by. I hope you enjoyed. If you did so, give me a small favor, subscribe and share it with your friends and colleagues. And if you are one of the people who keeps coming again and again, the loyal fan, thank you very much. Thank you for pushing us on the Apple Podcast charts in multiple countries. We keep changing spaces. We are in a country or two every week. So thank you very much for this. We can't do this without you. And at the end, as I say always, stay tuned for a new episode very soon. Thank you. Bye bye.
Hit that subscribe button, share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.